This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. And I've got the awesome Derek Lee here of Android Central. Hi, Derek. How are you?
Hello, Miriam. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. You know, it's kind of been a quiet week. It's only Wednesday, too, so maybe some exciting things will happen later this week. But look, there is a bunch of stuff out there. It's going to be kind of a chill podcast. I want to talk with you about the M3 Max, that the reviews are coming out, so we're starting to see benchmarks and stuff. I want to talk with you about the massive amount of S24 series Galaxy flagship rumors and leaks we're starting to see, which, you know, makes sense. We're 2 months away from a supposed launch. And then, you know, kind of puzzled about what Realme's doing with this new leaking all over the place GT5 Pro, because until now they really haven't done anything, at least based on what we know, as fancy as that. So
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on the M3 so far?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I would say so a little background on me. I used to be a film major. I'd say before and after that, I was mainly a Windows person. So, but when I went to school, studying film, I was like, all right, I guess I'll switch to a Mac. I've never been a big fan of Macs. I've never paid too much close attention to Apple when it comes to their computers until the M stuff started coming out.
It's hard to avoid the elephant in the room, right?
It really is, because, you know, especially since they switched from Intel, and like just seeing all these like benchmarks, seeing all these how well they perform, it's like, wow, should I switch back? Like, is it time to make that switch? And seeing these M3 MacBook Pros, it's so tempting, and especially for me because I'm looking for a new computer right now.
Oh, and you can't wait for the X Elite computers, because
I know.
It's going to be a little while, right, before they show up.
I think so. And I love Microsoft Surface computers, and I've been looking at the Surface Laptop Studio 2, but I'm also like, should I get this? Should I like get something else? Should I wait for the X Elite? Now I don't know. And then these M3 MacBooks come, and I'm just like, all right, well, is it time for me to switch back to a MacBook Pro? You know, me, the managing editor of Android Central. Like, is it?
I know. I mean, well, look, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I'm pretty agnostic. I have my preferences for sure. I'm a Mac user, but you know, I was a PC user for years before I was a Mac user, and I use Linux as well. I still always keep a PC around with the latest version of Windows, so I can try stuff out, play with it, use it. You know, I'm like, use what you want. I'm just really mad about the power efficiency of Intel Macs. And I shouldn't say Intel, I mean x86, right? And the whole charade of a dedicated GPU. I'm not a gamer. Like, you know, I get like, look, if you're a gamer, build your gaming PC. I've built many a gaming PC in my life for friends and stuff. But look, the reality is, I get it. GPUs are a big deal for gaming PCs. But I need a GPU to do the heavy lifting for video and for other more creative tasks. And I really don't care if it's a separate card. I really don't care if it's, you know, how it's implemented. I just want the oomph, right? And so for me, it's like Intel, unless you add some sort of external GPU, doesn't deliver that. And on top of that, they run hot, they need fans, they're not that power efficient. And so I've been mad about x86 for quite a while. I was mad about x86 when I had a Mac with an Intel chip, you know? So for me, the M series is really kind of like brought something which I've mentioned on the podcast before, which is that my belief that ARM is the way to go for every computing, or even RISC, right? RISC in general. So there's also RISC-V. Like, I do believe, and I believe this for decades now, that the only way to go forward for, you know, as we miniaturize is to go ARM. And
No,
so,
you're not wrong. Yeah.
laptops are not, as small as a phone, but what if you get the efficiencies of a phone and crank up the dial to 11, which is basically what Apple's been doing, and what, Qualcomm's trying to do with XLE. Like, I'm on board. It's just, I feel like the industry, and this is why I'm annoyed with the PC industry, is nobody's really like invested 100% because Intel is such a big player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like I made this analogy in the podcast before, but, it's like the legacy car makers with EVs. Nobody wants to commit. Yet you have these newcomers that arrive, right? Like Tesla or Lucid or Rivian, right? They might not be significant yet, although Tesla is significant. Oh, look at that. They might not be significant yet, but they are going to make an impact.
I still have faith in Lucid. And,
me too. I drove the Dream Edition Performance.
Oh gosh, I'm
1,111 horsepower.
Yeah. I am so jealous.
I'm a car enthusiast, so it's not like just EVs. I like a good manual transmission, mid-engine car, in the canyons. I know my cars, but that Lucid Air blew my mind. Like,
yeah, it's literally my computer screensaver right now. I love
Sapphire,
their cars.
Of course, is
it's they're beautiful, but it is, and I have total faith in Lucid, and I know they're going through a rough patch. All EV makers are going through a bit of a rough patch, but like with the analogy of like, all the legacy car makers, are struggling. I'm a big Toyota fan, and right now I think I just read yesterday that they have to they're like downsizing in China because everyone else is like, really focused on EVs, and Toyota is just like scrambling to like get their first EVs out there. And as far as like the M3, the MacBooks, I feel like Apple's really showing people what ARM is capable of. And it's really interesting. Well, because with Apple, like you have, they control the hardware and the software. So it's easy for them to really optimize everything.
Right.
So it can work just the way you want it to. And I feel like that's always been the struggle with Windows, is that, they've always relied on Intel, and even with Qualcomm, like they were always like separate things. Like it wasn't Microsoft building these chips. It was Microsoft working with, Qualcomm or Intel and whatnot. And so I feel like now with XLE, like I don't know quite how much involvement Microsoft has with its development, but I feel like at least Qualcomm sees that there is something that needs to be done there to get their chips in more PCs, because they're seeing all this, everything that Apple's doing, and now they're like, all right, well, we need that same thing on Windows. And I'm really, it gets me really excited, but at the same time, like, again, Apple is just so good at what they do, and it has me like second guessing. I'm like, wow, these M3 MacBooks look great, and I, because like I said earlier, I'm looking for a new PC, and the ones that I'm looking at all have like the dedicated GPUs, and they cost like so much money.
Yeah, right.
I don't really need the dedicated GPUs, because I only want a new computer for video editing, and at least with Premiere, I think it's mostly CPU anyways.
Right. Until they start optimizing, which I don't think they really have done.
Yeah, and I think you can have like GPU like encoding or whatnot. Like I'm still learning about this stuff, but like, yeah, it's mostly CPU. So I don't need the heavy GPU stuff. I just need it for video editing. I need the CPU to work well.
Right. This is actually a good segue, I think, to talk about the M3 MacBook Pro, the actual base model that The Verge reviewed, right? Because I feel like that would kind of be your perfect fit. Like this is coming from someone who has an M2 Air, and I never max it out. So I think, you get the better display, you get the better speakers, you get a fan if it needs to kick in, you have a bit of headroom there. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thought is the 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Well, you can get it for 16.
Yeah, but I think it's more so the price. Like the fact that Apple is even starting this at 8 gigabytes of RAM, I feel like is a bit...
It's ridiculous, 100%.
It is a bit ridiculous. Like it's kind of like with smartphones now, I think we're kind of past the point of 128 gigabytes of storage. Like we should start at least 256 now.
Yeah.
And I think with computers like this, especially a $1,600 laptop, 8 gigabytes of RAM just seems a little low.
It is definitely too low for a Pro model. But let me tell you this. I have never maxed out my 8 gigs on my MacBook Air M1 and MacBook Air M2 ever. So now I'm a orderly computer user. I don't leave 100 tabs open in my browser. I shut down apps I'm not using. So I'm a little bit more anal retentive than the average person. So if you're the same, 8 gigs will be fine. Now, here's my thought. Like if you're going to spend, if budget is the issue, then don't buy a MacBook Pro, buy a MacBook Air M2 or M3 when it comes out and get it with 16. That difference in price of the 16 will be putting you in Pro territory. But trust me, you don't really need more than that. And the displays on the Airs are pretty damn good too. So I think the base Pro for me, I would only recommend to get it with 16 because a Pro should have a little more RAM. Right. And as such, it puts it up in price. So I would say to people, only get the Pro, the base Pro, if you want the better display. Like the 120 hertz is real. The XDR display, the fact that you can do HDR is real. Right. Those are features that you cannot get on Air. But other than that, honestly, I mean, once an Air M3 comes out, like it's going to be a wash.
That'll be hot.
You get a fan though on the Pro. So if you do ramp up, like if you're rendering in Final Cut, and it starts cranking up the cores and the GPUs, if it's doing the GPU support, I think you'll want the fan. But honestly, my MacBook Air M2, even when it's rendering, like because it's using all the custom silicon for that, it doesn't really get that hot. You can render on battery life. Can you imagine that? Like the concept for a PC user that you can render all day long just on battery. You don't have to be plugged in. Like, so the point is that review to me, exemplifies two things, right? You've already talked about number one, too little RAM for a Pro model. But I do think people coming from the PC world do not understand what 8 gigs of RAM is giving them. Think of this as a smartphone. Okay.
True. I mean,
right?
iPhones are very well, do very well with little RAM.
Yeah. But that being said, it's Pro. Come on, Apple. Come on. Right? And then you want to charge me 200 more for 16? Come on.
Exactly.
Okay. No. Fair. So that's number one. Number two, though, it's really interesting that the benchmarks show that this M3 is, pretty damn solid. You don't even, I would say that other than the RAM, if you're a Pro user and you want that display, you don't necessarily need to go to the M3 Max or M3 Pro. I'd probably start with the Pro, right? Because those chips are insane. I'm also going to link to the Engadget review, which covered both the 14-inch, M3 and then the 16-inch M3 Max, which is like the workstation grade. And the benchmarks they're getting on this are just ridiculous, right? Now it's expensive because you're getting the best, right?
Yeah. I will say though that there's one thing that I saw. I saw an article kind of comparing the M3 and the X Elite, the X Elite chip, and I think as far as the base M3, it looks like the X Elite is quite a bit better.
Yeah, the X Elite in a 23 watt configuration, I think comes beats it, and then comes close to the M3 Pro, and then the X Elite in the 80 watt, which is the bigger fan, faster chips. Clock, whatever
that gets
that
close
thing
to
beats
the M3
it,
Pro,
especially in multi-core and basically in CPU side. So again, I know you're looking for a computer now, and that doesn't really solve your problem because here's the reality: we're not going to see any of these X Elite laptops until Computex, right? We're looking at June at this point. So if you can wait till June, maybe you'll get yourself a Lenovo or a Dell or an HP or an Asus that has what you want and can run Premiere. But here's the question, right? Premiere, will it be optimized for X Elite?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that's one of the questions I remember asking someone this question, and it seems like Premiere can run fairly fine on the current chips, but at the same time, like I don't want to, I don't want to risk it.
I mean, if it's running emulator, you're screwed, right? Like it's just not going to
Yeah,
work.
yeah. I don't know. That's why I'm like, I can either just go with, whatever Intel has now, or just wait. But I kind of don't want to wait.
Well, look, yeah, I think it's a tough decision.
It
And
really
the other thing
is.
is, if you switch to Mac, it's a switch of workflow, right? Like
Yes.
there's no doubt about it. Like I prefer my Mac workflow than my
Hmm.
PC workflow, so that's really where the preference comes in. And I should say Mac versus Windows or Mac OS versus Windows. Workflow wise, for me, all my tools, all my processes are kind of optimized because I've been
Yeah.
on a Mac for 20 years, right? Before that, I was on a PC, and everything was more optimized for that. So that's a big switch. But the reality is, you're not going to buy an Intel PC right now, right? Like that would be stupid, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Would it? I mean,
Like
I
the
don't know. I
future
think I
has been
think
written in front of your eyes for the
I
last two
know.
weeks.
I know, but I still feel like I could still get a lot out of at least like a 13th gen Intel. Like I
So
don't know. Like
here's my thing: you get a review
mhm,
unit, hang on to
mhm.
it for a year, and then move on to whatever is available in June
I
after.
wish. Unfortunately, I don't review laptops, so I don't have anyone sending me any review units. But I
We
mean,
need to hook
I'm
you up
happy
with
to
Lenovo
start.
or something.
I know. I've been looking at Lenovo for my next,
So here's
so
the
we'll
thing,
see.
right? Like when they did the Think phone, they sent me a Think phone and an X Carbon laptop
Oh yeah, they did
to
that with my
test the
coworker as
integration. So
well.
I still have
Yeah.
this review unit. Maybe I should just lend it to you for a little while.
Well,
I don't think
my
it's powerful
coworker
enough though. It's
my
kind of a
my
pretty.
coworker has the Lenovo ThinkPad as well. He reviewed it, and so maybe I could just have him send it to me. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's probably not powerful enough. But you did bring up a good point, which is will Premiere be optimized for this X Elite chip? And I think that's a point that I am still curious about overall, like beyond Premiere is Windows going to be well optimized for this chip?
Well, this is a big challenge. Microsoft
Yeah.
says they're on board, but they said they're on board last time too. And with I have a Surface Pro X here, first gen,
uh,
and it's great. I love the hardware, but man, it's a dog. And I mean, like, of
yeah.
course, it's not the same caliber at X Elite. I get that. Like, that never was meant to be. But
Right.
like, it's not just a dog because it's not very fast. It's also a dog because it's just like not getting the app support. Chrome still doesn't run native on
Yeah.
Snapdragon 8CX. Like, you know what I'm
Whatever it
saying?
is. Yeah. And and
Windows on
and
ARM.
that's the main thing is that like yes, now we're finally getting the hardware, but we need the software to catch up too.
Yeah.
And with Apple, again, everything is kind of controlled, so they kind of have it all together. Now we're just, with Windows, it's all these disparate parts that are coming together, and hopefully Microsoft can, get developers and apps on board with
Well, I think
supporting this
the
chip.
problem
And
is going back to my EV analogy is it's a systematic problem. It's not a
Mhm.
problem of Microsoft themselves, Qualcomm themselves, and the Intel themselves and the PC manufacturers themselves. It's the system. All of them together are not going to make
Yeah,
this happen. It's the same as all of
yeah,
them together, the traditional car makers are not really making the EV thing happen as good as they could. And I don't think
yeah,
you can change that. And that's my biggest concern. Like, I'm just hoping that one manufacturer, like pick Lenovo, say, that Lenovo
hmm
just decides, okay, let's work with Microsoft and Qualcomm to get the best experience on X Elite.
yeah.
And then
And I
you'll
mean,
see that the reviews will be glowing, the
yeah.
customers will be happy, and then Dell and HP are going to be like, maybe we should do this. And then Intel's going to be screwed.
Yeah, I mean, we see the same thing, with like, for instance, Wear OS. Samsung was like, all right, let's work with Google on this and try to make something better. And now Wear OS is in a better place than it has been.
For sure.
It's still getting, still has some work, but like, um,
I'm wearing it right
it
now.
yeah, I got the Galaxy Watch 5. But yeah,
Whee!
it's in such a better place because Samsung was like, all right, let's come in and help Google fix this. And that definitely needs to happen with Windows. It's just a matter of who's going to do it.
So let's hope In the meantime, there's also iMac reviews, iMac M3, and I'm a little butthurt by this one because
Why?
look, I'm an iMac user. I'm right now using an Intel iMac for this. I have, of course, my MacBook Air is what I use the most because I'm always on the road. But when I'm in my office, it's just nice to have the bigger screen. And I don't like the idea of plugging my laptop and closing the lid and all of that. So I was looking forward to them finally announcing a larger screen iMac because 24 inches is just not big enough for me. Like
Really?
I would have been all over the M1 iMac when it came out. And a lot of people are like, why did you buy another, like a monitor or something? You don't understand. In the same way as that tight integration of software and hardware, having an iMac, if you're like not needing to upgrade anything, you just want to plug a bunch of Thunderbolt drives in the back and have a wireless keyboard and mouse and the built-in webcam and all the goodness, it's amazing. It's an amazing experience. That's really all you need. If you're not that person, I don't blame you, but right now I can't get something to replace this crappy now because it's old, 27-inch iMac. Yet this iMac has a 5K beautiful display that still works perfectly. I feel bad putting this in the recycling bin or what else I'm going to use it for. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
I mean, is it 24 inches? Is it really that like too small for you?
24 to 27. It's three, like when you're, inches, like, come on. It's the point I'm making is,
no, I get it. Yeah.
Like, look, I'm not a size queen, but I need at least, I was hoping they'd go to 30 maybe or something.
Right.
But look, it's not happening. The Verge has had an interview with someone who was very clear at Apple. It's not happening. So my choice is, I'm in a dilemma too. So I'm trying to point out to you. And my dilemma is, do I keep this iMac and gut it? Like there's kits you can buy online that let you open it up. You remove the motherboard, you put a little board in there. That board gives you HDMI and DisplayPort support and turns the actual beautiful, this is a high-end LG 5K panel. It's covered in glass. It's gorgeous, right? Like it turns that into a really high-quality monitor. Nice. So, maybe I do that. And then because it's like $200 on eBay plus a bit of, I've opened stuff up. It's not unusual for me to tinker with hardware. So I could do that and then buy a Mac Mini. Right now M2 or M2 Pro, or buy a Mac Mini M3 when it comes out. Because the Mac Mini is a beast. That thing is unbelievably fast. So I'd get that with maybe 16 gigs, right? And then we're looking at about the same price. Like, here's what you have to know, Derek. I spent $1,700, maybe more, $1,800 on this iMac in 2017. Right? So I'm looking at spending, this is a business expense. I'm looking at spending the same amount. I don't want to go to, right now, if I got a studio display from Apple, the 27-inch display, it's like $15.99. And then if I buy a Mac Mini that I want with the specs that I want, it's about $7.99. So I'm looking at like $2,400. I don't want to spend $2,400, especially because the monitor is like, it's running iOS internally, right? That's because it's got a webcam and it's got like, speakers built in and stuff. It's like the last thing I want is a monitor that I need to update firmware on. Okay, like I am drawing the line. A monitor should be a dumb device. Okay, so here's my question. My question becomes: do I buy an iMac, and say screw it, like 3 inches smaller, but I get this incredible performance and this super slick all-in-one integration, and I would buy the highest end one, like the 16 gig 512 or something, or hear me out. I buy some sort of LG 5K 27-inch really high-end monitor with the same panel as my iMac, since LG makes the panel. LG has a monitor that's on sale on Amazon for about $950, $960. That is really nice, has a built-in webcam and built-in speakers, but it's not smart. It doesn't have any kind of I'm sure there's firmware for it, but it's not like, like Apple where they update the firmware on the display every other day.
Yeah.
And I buy a Mac Mini, right? And then I'm in my $1,700 range again. So this is what I'm struggling with right now. Do I get that sleek, beautiful Apple integration, pick a fancy color from the iMac and get a smaller display, but a faster chip, right? M3 is faster than M2. Or do I get M2 Mac Mini and get, a monitor of some kind? Tough, right?
I mean, what color would you get?
Purple.
Purple, interesting. I'm not a fan
I
of
mean,
purple.
they're
I
all
like
very
the orange.
good.
The orange, yeah, they are very good. The orange is so nice though.
I mean, they're so good. All of them. I can't like purple is really more like a. I like purple always, so I'm just going to default to that because I can't make up my mind.
Royalty. Come on.
Yeah.
No. I mean, okay. Everyone who knows me knows that I am like an LG fan, like fanboy. So I would almost opt for the second option of just get an LG monitor, and the M2, because like how much faster is the M2? What is the M2 Max?
It's a little faster than the M3 regular, but it's close. Like the problem is the M2 Mac Mini gets really expensive, so I'm trying to stay with the M2 right now. If I were to go Mac Mini, it'd be M2. Just like M2. I get that's right now. The iMac is very attractive to me because even though I lose some screen size, it's still a faster chip, so I'm more bulletproof for another 2-3 years. How much faster? Maybe 1.2 times, 1.3 times faster. It's not a huge difference.
I mean, but because like it's like one thing that I'm always trying to think about is like how much more power do you need?
Right. The thing is, you have to keep in mind, I'm more likely to keep the Mac Mini for more years.
Right.
So if I go to a Mac Mini, I'm probably better off buying an M2 Pro, and then we're starting to get really expensive. So
right.
I'm trying to be a cheap bitch. Okay?
Well, I get it, because this is why, like, over the past several years, I've been trying to buy a new laptop, and every time I'm like, okay, there's one that I like, but I'm like, but I could get this cheaper, especially now with like the Surface Laptop Studio 2. That thing is way too expensive for what you get for it. And I'm also trying to be a cheap bitch, which is why I'm now looking at Lenovo, because I can get like more RAM and whatnot for like a third, like 2/3 of the cost. But that's a hard one, because I feel
that's
like
what I'm saying. It's like
I feel like Apple supports their hardware well enough to where it won't matter.
I've got Macs that are still running, like that are 10 years old, no problem. Like they're not my main Macs. I use them for like home entertainment that connects to my projector and stuff. Theo uses a second MacBook Air, an older one, for playing games, just to play games, like casual games, like Civilization and this kind of stuff.
I feel like Apple supports their hardware well enough to where getting an M2, like, I feel like it shouldn't be a problem.
Might be okay.
Yeah, I feel like you'll be okay.
In the same way as you're struggling, I'll let you know, and the audience, I'll let you all know. And keep an eye on Derek. We'll share the social media handles, and Derek will let us all know, hopefully, what he decides to get.
I know, because I think I'm gonna pull the trigger probably this month. It's my anniversary this month, so that's going to be my gift to myself.
Right on. Very nice. So basically, I'll put up the reviews. The iMac M3 review is from TechCrunch. Brian Heater's a good friend of mine. Good stuff. All these reviews are pretty solid. Check them out, folks. They'll all be in the show notes. I think the M3 is cranking up things a notch in a way that's very interesting. And I think that the only faux pas in all of this, there's two, and that's the 8 gigs entry level, MacBook Pro here. Come on, Apple. And the iMac being only available in one screen size. Let's talk about some other stuff. Dimensity 9300, MediaTek just announced a competitor to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3.
Yes, they did.
So what was your take? Well, like, you saw it. Are you, obviously we're not going to see devices in the US anytime soon. I've got the 9200 from last year in the Xiaomi 13T Pro that I'm currently reviewing. Let me see if I can pull that out for the Patreons who are watching the video here. There it is. This is the 13. It's got Leica branding on it. This is not the 14. So it's already been eclipsed. This came out early October and it's already been eclipsed. It's like, what the hell? And it's 9200. And so obviously abroad, this is not a Chinese phone. It's like a global. So abroad in some markets, you're getting these chips from MediaTek. So we're going to see the 9300, but I don't think we'll see it in the US or Canada.
Yeah, I don't think so either, which is a little unfortunate because, one problem I always have is that the US, just the competition, there isn't much competition here. And I really wish there was, because Xiaomi makes such great phones and MediaTek makes such great chips. But now this Dimensity 9300 is very interesting because because you often see chip makers like Qualcomm, MediaTek, Samsung always have like the one prime core, you know, 3 or 4 performance cores, and
Yeah.
then some efficiency cores to help
Yeah.
things, stay efficient. MediaTek is just like, no, we're just going to give you 4 prime cores and 4 performance cores, and screw the efficiency cores. We don't need those. Which I'm just like, what are y'all doing? Like, this is like, I don't know. I'm intrigued, but I'm also like a little worried. Like, should y'all be doing this?
Well, I think this is the way we're going. This is a good question you're asking. My take is that it's the same as what we've seen Apple do on the M3 actually, and then X Elite as well. Here's the thing. If you look at like a graph of time versus performance and efficiency, the prime cores, and especially the big cores, have gotten so efficient over time that they're coming close to matching the efficiency of the quote unquote efficiency cores that were designed by ARM like 2 or 3 years back, right? Even maybe 5 years ago. And so there's one thing. The other thing is, an analogy I've made on the podcast before is that, if you're like a farmer that has a sensor in a field somewhere, right? And you need to send data sporadically, like maybe temperature, you measure the temperature once an hour and the humidity once an hour, and you send that to the cloud. And then you get it on your computer in your office to look at your crops. There are solutions like that. A lot of them are basically IoT devices. They're solar powered. Maybe they have a battery backup to run at night. They're sitting on a pole somewhere, whatever. They are connected via 4G or maybe even 3G, right? And it turns out that they've done some testing. If you replace the radio on these things with a 5G radio, instantly you get better battery life, you get better efficiency, you get lower power consumption. How is that possible? How is that possible when 5G is faster, right? 5G is going to be cranking up the airwaves a lot harder. It's because 5G is more efficient to carry that data. That data is so small that now instead of sending like 3 seconds of data on 4G, you're sending 1/4 of a second of data on 5G. It's the same amount of data, right? You're sending the same info, but you're doing it in very short bursts of very fast speed. Okay. And guess what? The radio only has to turn on for 1/4 of a second instead of the 5 seconds before it. So I think the analogy here we're seeing is the same thing. Instead of firing up these efficiency cores to run a lower priority task for 5 seconds, you're now running it for 1/4 of a second. Sure, you're cranking up the energy a little bit there, but you're basically having these little blips of power that are overall averaging out to better efficiency. So it's kind of like pulse width modulation. PWM, we talk about it on display brightness, but everything you use in your life right now, dimming of LEDs, even dimming of normal light bulbs, like old school incandescent light bulbs, your space heater when it changes the temperature, your heating elements on your oven if you don't have gas, all of that uses pulse width modulation. It doesn't actually lower the brightness, it cranks the brightness to max with a space in between. So it's on for maximum, off, on for maximum, off. It does it very fast, which is why the flicker becomes an issue, and dimming, and that's why, people are sensitive to it. But the bottom line is it's super efficient. That's why your, fancy Samsung stove, induction stove uses much less energy because it's just firing that element up at gigahertz speeds or whatever, megahertz speeds, right? So if you do the same in a chip with a prime cores or with performance cores, you might get the same efficiency because the inherent efficiency is so good to start with. And I think that's what we're seeing.
I'm curious to see, I'm curious to just use a phone with this chip and to see just exactly how battery life is affected and whatnot, because I think there were early rumors about this chip, about, that were talking about the fact that it would use, 4 prime cores, 4 performance cores, and the fact that I guess OEMs were having issues with overheating and just not being able to manage the thermals of the chip. And, MediaTek did come in and say, no, this is not correct. This is baseless, whatever. But I am, now that we at least know that part of that report about the the configuration of the chip is true, I'm just curious to see these efficiency claims. Really, like I just want to know just how efficient are these prime cores. If we're able to like use them, in the way that you say. I just I can't wait to see the first phones with this chip and to see how reviewers um are handling the speed, because it seems like a very powerful chip. Like I'm excited for that.
Right.
Because
It's interesting because I'll be at MediaTek Summit next week, and maybe they'll have benchmarks and we'll know a lot more. I'll find out. But here's the thing, that 9200 that I have in that Xiaomi 13T Pro, right? Which as I said, came out in early October, and then they launched the 14 Pro like late October. It's really weird. Usually they have at least 3 or 4 months between. The T series is kind of like the OnePlus T series, affordable flagship. They cut a few corners, and but that 9200 feels so snappy. It's great. Like, I don't feel like this is handicapped by having the 9200 versus, say, a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Even gaming is super rock solid on that phone.
Right.
So my point is that I think we'll be okay. MediaTek, it makes more on chips than anyone else. Like every smart speaker, every almost pair of earbuds, every smart TV has a MediaTek chipset in it. Every, Amazon little twinkle that you buy has a freaking ARM chip by MediaTek.
I just feel like this is such a novel approach, because we've seen even Qualcomm, stumble a bit, with the 8 Gen 1. Efficiency was just horrible.
Well, that's because it was manufactured by Samsung instead of TSMC.
Well, that too. Oops. But like, oops. But like my Galaxy S22, I loved the phone and I used it up until the Razer Plus came out. But battery life was not great. So I'm just very curious to see what battery life on these new Dimensity 9300 chips will be, and also what MediaTek is doing with generative AI. I really want, because I know Qualcomm talked a lot about that with
on device, for sure, the
on device stuff, which was really impressive, and it's nice to see that Qualcomm is like having this stuff like built into the chip, so that many like OEMs can come in and do what they want. So I'm really curious to see MediaTek's sort of take on this, because I know they talked about it a bit. I haven't seen any like demonstrations or anything, and I assume we're going to see a lot of that during the
I hope so.
summit.
And maybe some announcements of devices too. Like typically Vivo launches their X series flagship, basically their imaging flagship, like similar to the Xiaomi 14, right? And they launch it with 2 chips usually. They launch it one with Snapdragon, whatever the latest is, and one with Dimensity, whatever the latest is, at the same time. So we haven't heard a peep from them about the Snapdragon model. So I'm wondering if they're going to launch the Dimensity model first.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
I mean, this is complete speculation on my part, folks. I have no idea. So let's switch gears to Samsung, because, the rumors are piling up here on the Galaxy S24. Leaks and rumors galore. I'm just going to quickly step through them. We get some images of the Ultra, which show the flat display and the bezel. We have rumors that, not rumors, kind of almost confirmed by Qualcomm, that there will be an Exynos version of the S24 series, possibly just the non-Ultra models, and obviously not in North America. There's very, very, very strong rumors that the launch event will be on January 17th in San Francisco. And then finally, there is, again, confirmation, very strong rumors, very strong leaks of a titanium model for the S24, which I think, unlike Xiaomi, who has a Xiaomi 14 Pro Titanium Edition, will be this default, I think, on the S24 Ultra. So what's your take overall on all this? Is this pretty much what you expect?
I would say a lot of it is what I expect. Some of it is not. Like I was pretty impressed with, like, I reviewed the S23, the regular one, and I was pretty impressed with that. And to me, I was like, that's the phone you should upgrade to if you had like the S22.
Oh, it's maybe a great phone.
Or like what? It's a great phone. But now I'm looking at the S24, and now that because we know it's probably going to have the 8 Gen 3 and everything that Qualcomm announced there. But then, while I was listening to the earnings call, when Cristiano said, yeah, we're going to have the majority share in the Galaxy S24. And that surprised me because they made it seem like it was like Qualcomm was going to have pretty much all the entire share for the next couple of years in Samsung's flagship phone. So now that Samsung is apparently going to, step up and bring back Exynos is interesting because we know Exynos doesn't have the greatest.
Well, yeah, let's see how much better it is. I mean, look, G3, on pixels based on Exynos, we all know that despite Google's trying to differentiate itself. Yeah. The reality is we know that, and it's better. So, hey,
it's better, but it's still not up to par. Like it still can't really compete with Qualcomm.
and that's look, the reality is I think this is a yield issue. They can't make enough. TSMC doesn't have the bandwidth to make enough 4 nanometer chips overall, right? So, but what I'm more intrigued by, honestly, is I'm not surprised about the titanium because, of course, you would do that. And the images that were leaked, not renders, images, make it look really nice. It's got that brush finish you saw on the iPhone as well.
Yeah, love it.
It looks really hot. But here's the thing: they've gone to a flat screen. I'm personally okay with that. I prefer that, but it means it has more bezel and maybe it's going to be a little wider because of it. I don't know. What's your take on that? Because I don't want wider.
I don't know. That's a good point. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the curved screen at all. I'm so glad that Samsung has been gradually making it flatter and flatter every year. I'm not sure if I have a problem with it being wider. I don't know. I look at my LG Wing, for example, and it has a curved display. Yes, I still have the LG Wing.
I love the LG. I kept mine because this is the last LG.
Exactly. That's why I kept mine too. and I wish that it was flat and wider because I don't know. I don't like how tall it is. And not to say that the S23 Ultra is tall, super tall, but I think I don't think it'll be a super huge.
I mean, now that I see the images,
bezels still look pretty small.
Yeah, now that I see the images, I'm like, okay, this is hot. I can live with this. My only concern, I prefer flat, but I'm also not completely angry at curved screens. So I can live with curved, but I prefer flat. My concern with large phones is that the curves have traditionally given us thinner bezels and a slightly narrower phone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose that because I've got big hands, but they're not, they're not that big. And this is looking hot. As for the January 17th thing, of course, they of course they would do this earlier because everything is shifting earlier this year with
shifting, which is interesting.
And let's be the first in the West with an 8 Gen 3 phone is kind of I think kind of the approach here. So yeah, go for it. I will be around and hopefully I'll get invited.
Hopefully.
Let's talk about this other phone because it's kind of a doozy, really. I mean, the context. I'm gonna sum it up for the audience here a little bit. Realme is kind of like the new OnePlus. They're like the value brand of the BBK group umbrella. Yeah. And they, as much as they're not under Oppo, how Oppo and Vivo are kind of very different. Oppo, kind of has OnePlus rolled into it. Yeah. But Vivo, kind of different software, different hardware. It's really they share parts a little bit, but it's really two different things.
Yeah.
Realme has always been on the org chart based as a third thing of its own. But if you look at the Realme OS, if you look at, the Realme UI or whatever it's called, you look at the hardware, it's total Oppo and OnePlus hardware, right?
Okay. I've not used a Realme phone before.
It's exactly it's basically you fire up an Oppo or a OnePlus and then you got a Realme. It's the same thing. So typically what they've done is they've looked at the part spin of BBK Group and gone, let's make a almost as good OnePlus 11 but cheaper for India and other markets. So they'll cut a few corners, no wireless charging, of course, maybe do a plastic frame instead of a metal. maybe lesser, it's like last year's cameras instead of this year's camera. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of been their MO. And it's good. Like you get solid, affordable phones out of it.
Yeah.
And they always use the latest chips, which is nice. You don't get performance sacrifice. You might get last year's display and last year's cameras. Like, you know, maybe.
But you're still getting this year's performance.
Yeah. So the GT5 non-Pro, which I have, which is currently their flagship, which is China only and is 240 watt. Charging, just like the GT3 they launched, the global one they launched in MWC.
It's super fast.
You know, that has an 8 Gen 2, right? And it has 240 watt. But to give you an idea, the display is like last year's display. It has an IMX 766, which is like last year's, you know, kind of better flagship camera. But this Pro is kind of blowing my mind because it goes against everything we think of Realme. Like it not only has an 8 Gen 3, which is obvious because that's the current chip du jour, right? But then you look at it and it's got a 3000 nits display, something we're expecting to see on the OnePlus 12. And then it's got, you know, like a crazy camera system with potentially a Lithium sensor from the OnePlus Open.
From the OnePlus Open, yeah.
And it's just like, what? So I'm like, really? Like, can they go higher than 240 watt? That's the other question, right? Like, how can they add wireless charging maybe? That would be the first Realme with wireless charging.
Has anyone announced anything higher than 240 watts?
260 on Techno.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they shipped it. Yeah, you know, Techno, the brand that shares phone tech with Infinix.
What phone did they ship with?
You'll have to Google it. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's out there.
Techno of all companies. That's so interesting.
Techno is pushing the envelope with the folding phones and stuff.
I know Techno's
They're the rising
doing the
star.
thing. Yeah. But so I mean, first of all, I don't know. Like 240 is already enough.
It's amazing.
I feel
like you charge your phone in 9 minutes. It's amazing.
How quick?
9 minutes.
9 minutes to charge. How big is the battery?
About 4,400 or 4,500, something like that.
Gosh, that is impressive. So I don't even know if they need to
doesn't even get warm, by the way.
See, I wouldn't, if I were them and I were already putting, you know, this new display, this new chipset into the phone, like I wouldn't even bother upping the charging speed. Like either keep it where it is or even 160 would be fine. Like
oh yeah. But I mean, it's their shtick, right? I don't see them doing a GT5 non-Pro with 240 and then the Pro model with less than 240.
Yeah.
And this it's supposed to have a bigger battery, 5260, so it won't charge in 9 minutes. It might charge in 12 minutes. But jolly G, right? But I think look, the point is that the display looks like it's the same display as what we've heard the OnePlus 12 is getting,
which is gonna be very interesting.
And the camera from the Open, like this is a beast. And I'm just like, this makes no sense. Like what?
I know.
So I mean, kudos to Realme. Maybe Realme is gonna get assimilated into the Oppo OnePlus umbrella. I would not be surprised. It makes sense. They're so lined up. Like there's so much tech that is identical on these phones. It's almost a branding differentiator and a value. Like they're basically the new OnePlus. Like you want the cheapest BBK group, like the best bang for your buck at BBK group. It used to be OnePlus, right? Now it's good, but it's not the best. Realme is just always stealing the freaking show away from OnePlus. Yeah. It's just weird.
And not even just with price, but just with their tech too. Like, you know, we're seeing the fastest charging speeds on these Realme phones. We're, you know, still pretty impressive stuff on OnePlus. But yeah, like I feel like Realme, like when it comes to just like the wow factor, like I'm really seeing that from Realme.
Yeah, it's impressive. I'm looking forward to it. Who knows? This will probably be China only, but I have really good connectors with Realme.
Hopefully not.
So they might send it to me. My Realme GT5 right now has 24 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage too.
See that?
So and it's not a Pro model. That's what I'm saying. You know, it's like what?
That 24 gigs of RAM. That's so much. That's more than I even want on my next computer. Like I'm fine.
You don't
with
need that.
Gigabits. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't need that on my computer. Like. Why do I need that on my phone? I
know, it's crazy. The last thing I want to talk about is actually pretty cool because it is a Poco phone that just got announced. And I don't know how much you follow the Xiaomi budget brands. There's Redmi and Poco, right?
Yeah.
They're very similar. Poco is kind of more playful, more colors, more more kind of like bleeding edge tech in their approach to the marketing, whereas Redmi is more like, we're a value brand, but we don't cut corners. So like, to give you an example, back in the day, the Redmi Note series is always a delight. They're a mid-range phone with budget pricing, like $300-ish.
Yeah.
And imagine the same specs as a Xiaomi 14, right? Like 14, the flagship. But imagine you crank down the processor to like a mid-range processor, and then maybe you don't put an LTPO that refreshes all the way, like variable, like maybe you do the previous gen that does like 10 to and maybe you do like a slightly lesser camera. But I remember reviewing a Redmi Note 10 or something a while back, and it was basically 80% or 90% of the experience of using the flagship from Xiaomi at the time. I think at the time was the Xiaomi 11 or 12, and for half the price. Like, for instead of $699, I was like $349. And I was like, nobody needs more phone than this. And this is like 3 years ago. So Poco is like that, but Poco also makes really cheap phones. Like this is $129 phone. Okay, I just got the price list.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy cheap. Like,
so
I
look at
couldn't
the
imagine
specs.
a phone like this in the US.
Look at the specs and tell me what you think. Isn't this nuts?
Yeah, like 90 hertz, 90 hertz display,
IPS,
5,000 milliamp hour. Yeah, but 5,000 milliamp hour battery.
It's got a 4G chipset. It's got a MediaTek Helio, right?
The Helio is the only like.
It's the only thing that's going to be a little iffy. But even the RAM, like the 6128 is 109, and it has micro SD. The 8256 is 129 US dollars. The cameras are even decent. I had the previous C series, I think the C40, I want to say. And I've took some good photos with it. Like, it's not like, it's better than Moto G. So like, it's, wow, right?
Moto is like our value brand here in the US.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess TCL, but like, you would not find a phone
TCL,
with
they still exist.
Yeah, I guess they do. You would not find a phone with these specs in the US at this price.
I mean, it's amazing. So I got one incoming. I asked for it because I was like, I got to try this. Nice. Like, I want to see what $109 phone delivers. Like, and hopefully I can take it with me to the MediaTek Summit. Since it is a MediaTek chip, it'll be great. Yeah. Because it should be arriving before that. Because I want to take some photos there, and then I'm gonna do a Twitter like poll. What do you think? What do you think of this photo? Give me, what was this taken with, or whatever. Because look, it's amazing. Look, it doesn't look bad either. It's like,
it doesn't. It looks like a very. I love the blue too. It's a very nice blue. No, I would love to see if they could, like, because obviously it's a 4G phone. I want to see if they can make like a 5G version.
Well, they make like Poco goes all the way. Like Poco goes all the way. They have they have flagships, right? They make 8 Gen 2 phones. It's
but just this phone in particular, like at 120, what is it, 129 or 149 for the highest end? Like, maybe 169 for a 5G version or something like that. Like, that's still impressive.
Yeah, like a Dimensity 900 or 800 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Like, that would be impressive.
I've played with a lot of Poco phones over the years, and think of them as like the Xiaomi 13T that I just told you, the T Pro that I have, the 9200 Dimensity phone that I have in my pocket, or think of it as a OnePlus 10T. That's kind of like what the higher end Pocos are like. It's like the Realmes, like. Basically, one trick pony, right? Like, one feature is out of control, like the 240 watt. But in the past, they've always managed to kind of stay affordable flagship with not the greatest specs, which is why this, kind of going back to the Realme, this Pro model is kind of breaking the mold. Like, if Poco made a Xiaomi 14 Poco branded, I'd be like, what? But they're always detuning, right? So you expect that. But, very few companies other than Moto go down to this price point and deliver a good experience. And that's why
even Moto.
Even
Even
Moto, it
Moto
starts to
doesn't.
fall
Like,
apart at that price,
yeah, like
right?
I reviewed the Moto G Pure last year or the year.
Yeah,
I don't remember when
it
and that
wasn't
was
that good.
the worst. And even this year, the Moto G Play was not great, and that was a 4G only phone, I think. Yeah, Motorola's non 5G phones are not great, and I mean, again, I think part of that has to do with I think they use the Helio chip, and I'm not a big fan of the Helio chips.
I think it's not just that,
So
it's not optimized because I've used phones
that
with Helio
too.
chips that are really okay. Like the only thing that I think was going to save this phone, honestly, is it's got a 720p display, which, for that price, you're not going to complain. But that's
Yeah,
the point. You're driving less pixels, right?
yeah.
But in the
Still
Moto
90
G
hertz.
world, that doesn't seem to improve the performance.
Yeah.
Because I've played with Helio G chips that that were driving 1080p OLEDs. Like
Mm.
Infinix actually and Techno have a bunch of those, and they're
Yeah.
fine. They run
Yeah.
really nice.
Moto's phones, like with even just the 90 hertz or whatever, like running on the Helio, like just don't like it feels like it's a 60 hertz or lower. Like it's just
I
not
think that they're
great.
messing up the software. They just don't care.
Which is so interesting because their software is basically like
It's
near
so
stock
good. I know.
Android.
I
Like
know. What the hell? Oh man,
I don't
crazy
know.
stuff. Listen, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, like what your social media handles are, and tell them about what
Yeah.
you do at Android Central?
So yeah, I am the managing editor at Android Central. So but I do write as well. So I'm like, I'm going over everything, but I write reviews for phones, smartwatches, sometimes smart scales. I'm also what else am I doing? I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm you can find me on the Twitter or
Hmm.
X
What's
at
your handle?
I am Derek Lee. So that's I am DERREKLEE. That's also my Instagram if you want to follow me there.
You do threads?
I'm on Threads as well, so it's the same. Same throughout all three. I am Derek Lee. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me. I don't know. What am I doing?
That's good.
I'm just
That's what
working.
we need.
I'm just
Android
working.
Central, and
Android
let's find you
Central.
on
Yeah, you can find me
social.
there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, that's TNKGRL, just like the comic book character. Drop the vowels and you get my handle on Twitter/X, Threads, Insta, Blue Sky, which is primarily where I'm at. So check it out. If you want to chat with me and Derek, find us on probably X. And as you know, folks, there's a URL for the podcast. That's mobiletechpodcast.com. We're also on all the big platforms. That's YouTube Music, because I think Google Podcasts is going away. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, everywhere, basically. So if your app lets you review or rate the show, please consider doing that. It would help for discovery. There's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. You know how YouTube works, so go there, like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, all that good stuff. Mostly it's like unboxings, hands-ons every now and then, like once a month or so I publish a video. I've just been too busy to publish more, but I'm hoping to change that. I keep saying that, but I just don't seem to find the time.
Tell me
Also,
about it.
if you want to help me out, there is a Patreon, of course, that you can join if you want to help me out. So Patreon is where I have a video version of the podcast that you can watch ahead of time, and it's less edited. There's more content usually, and so you get a little extra every week on video, which is kind of cool. So consider helping me out with Patreon, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There's also a bunch of other perks there. You can join our Discord server, a bunch of other stuff. So if you can help me, that would be great. If you don't want to use Patreon, I get it. There's another option. There is a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through that, make a donation, buy me a delicious coffee or something, and that would also help. So please consider these options. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, Derek, for being my guest. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We'll have you on the show at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have a show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.